Hello everyone, it's Gigabeef here, and today we're going to be taking a look at the MK47 Mutant, so stick around and let's get going. So at this stage the Mutant has been out for a while and it has received a few nerfs given how powerful you might expect this weapon to be. However, it's still very good and is one of the most well used weapons at the moment within the Tarkov 1211 meta. Broadly speaking, the AKM series of weapons, whilst not being meta per se, have seen fairly widespread use throughout the many ups and downs of Tarkov's weapons history, primarily down to the 7.62 BP round, which has incredible stats for both penetration and damage. However, this has historically been mitigated by limitations around the weapons that fire it specifically, typically through recoil either with the AKM or the AK-103 being the lowest recoil, but that has only ever been in the high 50s to mid 60s depending on the patch and the attachments at the time. Enter the MK47 Mutant. This is clearly the best 7.62x39 weapon, as it has a fire rate of 650, which is actually 50 higher than the other 7.62 weapons, remembering that the AKM and the 100 series chambered in 7.62 have a fire rate of 600, and it's the 545 versions that are 650. It can also be modded out with AR style mods that gives it access to much more of an M4-like feel than the rest of the AK series, which is also reflected in the stats. For this, however, you do have to pay quite a significant premium. The Mutant was already moved up the trader rep levels from Skier 3 to Skier 4, with the base gun at 105,000 rubles now, so it's pretty expensive as a starting point. Sometimes you can find this a bit cheaper on the flea market, but not usually less than 100,000 given the demand for this weapon. Skier only sells 2 of them as well per cycle, so it's not like there's an endless supply of this weapon that you can just take into raid. Just before we jump into the weapons builds themselves, I have a quick but exciting announcement to make because over the past few months I've been working to create dedicated music for this channel, which you'll be able to hear in the background right now, as well as videos in the future. I've always found it a struggle to choose the right music, so often I simply haven't used any in the past. But now we've been able to create an album of unique music that is exactly what I was looking for, and I'm really impressed with the production quality. So if you want to give it a listen, there's a Spotify link in the description where you'll find the playlist, and by the way, all of these tracks are also copyright and DMCA free, so if you did want to use something, just reach out to me and let me know and give me credit and all that good stuff, but that is an option too. So with that out of the way, let's jump into the preset system, and we can see here that if you type in Mutant, that doesn't actually work if you haven't saved a preset before, so you have to use MK47 and that will allow you to open up the stock preset. So from here we can see that the gun has 107 vertical recoil and 251 horizontal recoil as base with 67.5 ergonomics. This is not that bad really for the caliber and compared to some other weapons, although do note that the 103 has 52 ergo and 101 recoil, so technically slightly better recoil to start, which is where the better mods for the Mutant come in overall, but we'll compare those two in a moment. So as I usually like to do, let's look at the meta build, or the one with the lowest recoil at least, taking it right from scratch and building it up. So starting off, let's look at the charging handles. There is only one for this weapon, so that's very easy. It's the MK47 ambidextrous, so we're going to put that on. Next up on stocks, this screen is going to be very familiar to anybody who mods M4s routinely, because these are all of the buffer tubes that you normally get. Now the standard one that comes with it, the CMMG, is not the best. You can upgrade this to the advanced tube, which again is the best for the M4 and those other kinds of weapons. And on top of this, we're going to use the PRS Gen 3, which again is the usual one that will apply with the maximum recoil reduction. Next on pistol grips, there's no surprise here. Again, this looks very familiar to M4 modders. Out of all the different choices, we have the recoil reduction and also the Ergo PSG, which both have the same ergonomics, but the Growl is slightly lighter, so we're going to apply this one. Next, we have another easy choice, which is the receiver. There is only one, so we're going to use that, and that then unlocks the handguard and the barrel for the next stage of the build. In terms of barrels, there are two choices here. You have the 409mm barrel and the 254mm barrel. The gun comes with the 254, and in true Tarkov style, the longer barrel almost always comes with lower vertical recoil, so we're going to use this one to start with, and we're going to look at the other one in a second, but just to get to the lowest build, we're going to use this one. Now gas blocks are very straightforward. There is only the CMMG low profile gas block, so I'm going to stick that on right here. And then next we're going to look at handguards. Now when you look through all of these, there's the base handguard and then all the rest give -2 recoil reduction, so they're all pretty much the same, except for the Lancer, which gives a little bit more ergonomics. From here we can apply the M-LOK 4.1 inch rail, which is a very easy rail to get hold of, which is not always the case for the AK platforms, and that's why this is nice that this one has AR mods. And we can choose a foregrip in here, and usually we're going to pick the RK2, as we always do, because this is the lowest recoil reduction in the game, which is -4%. Now here's where things get kind of interesting around the muzzle department. So used to be the T-lock was the best in slot for this, but this was nerfed, and this was a combination that we've talked about before for the SR25, which is the Sig Sauer taper lock muzzle adapter. On top of that, you can apply the Sig Sauer SRD suppressor, and in the middle of this, you have these three choices here, and one of them, which is this one, the 2-port brake, is the best out of the three. and that gets you down to 53 recoil. Now this used to be, as I said, the best combination, but is not anymore, because this was nerfed because I think it was deemed that this gun was too good, and unfortunately there's a couple of other guns like the SR25 that use this that kind of got caught in the crossfire, so that's a bit of a shame, because there's sort of collateral damage in this that wasn't really intended. However, the ramifications of this is that you can use one of the other muzzle brakes to get to the lowest recoil, which is now the Thunderbeast. And we're going to apply the Thunderbeast compensator and then the Ultra 5 suppressor on the top, and that gets you to 51, which is in fact the lowest recoil that you can get for the Mutant in this patch 12.11 at the moment. So at 51 recoil, this means that the gun versus the stock gun has got 52% worth of recoil reduction applied to it. And the ergonomics here is 35 without any scopes or magazines, which is actually pretty bad. That's not very good, really. There's a couple of other interesting points to note from here, such as the Lancer only has the 4.1 inch guide, which means you can only use these small handguards that fit onto a tiny little rail. Now there are some of the other handguards available. They're not necessarily best in slot, but it's interesting to note that if you use the Split, for example, you can use the CQR Hera arms grip, which normally is prohibited on AK platforms, and because this is not really an AK, it uses AK rounds, but it's kind of more like an AR in terms of modding, you're actually able to use it on this weapon, whereas even if you have long rails on some other guns, it says prohibited by the weapon class, and so you're not actually allowed to use them, even though it technically looks like it might fit. The other interesting point is that the BMD combo can't be used on the longer barrel for the Mark 47, and this is the blast mitigation device combination, and this is the one that you normally would find on 7.62 NATO weapons. Now this is intriguing because if you don't want to be suppressed, which might be the case for a few reasons, but primarily because it's expensive and it also hurts your ergo a lot, then a much cheaper build is to switch back to the stock barrel, which can take the blast mitigation muzzle combo. Now I'm not sure why that's the case, but I imagine it's something to do with the realism of the barrels. If we try to make the changeover, we actually can't because of the handguard. So you have to remove the handguard first, change over the barrel, put on another handguard, but now you're only allowed to use the default one, which kind of is an interesting thing because it means that we don't actually have much choice around what we can use and we're sort of forced to do this. Now the blast mitigation 3-part, I've talked about this before when we've discussed the FAL or the SA58, that's the Lantac BMD blast mitigation, you have the Lantac Dragon that goes inside it, and then you also have the BMD blast mitigation device that goes around the whole thing. And this actually gets you to 53 because the BMD is really efficient in terms of recoil reduction, even compared to the other suppressors. It is actually the best and most recoil reducing muzzle brake combination that you can get for 7.62 in general, but that includes this weapon. So even though we've shortened the barrel, you actually get something very close to the lowest recoil of the long version of 51, now at 53 using the shorter version, but now we have way more ergo. We're also not suppressed either, and so that boosts the ergo even further, and it's actually a really great base if you want to run around with something and you're not that bothered about being suppressed. Right, what I'm going to do next actually is flick back to the other Mutant that we had before, and I did actually save this as a profile. What we're going to do is look at this longer barrel version and just see how much it is, because this is going to be eye-watering, I imagine, to a lot of you. Now, one point to note is that you do need mechanic level 4 to buy the advanced receiver buffer tube. I don't have mechanic level 4 and so I can't buy this, but we know that it's 12,000 rubles. So what I'm going to do is get rid of this owner type traders, and that's going to open up all of this stuff. Now, when you're looking at these, this number down here doesn't really mean anything because this is a bit stupid at this point. We need to tweak some of this before it makes sense. Because if we're going to buy the Mark 47 Mutant weapon, then clearly we don't actually need necessarily everything that's as part of the build. And we'll also be able to sell some of this stuff back, but you can't really see that here. So anyway, we get the receiver when we buy the gun. We need to buy the Strike Industries receiver, but we're not going to pay 135,000 for it because that's absolutely outrageous. So let's get rid of this. The Mark 47 ambidextrous charging handle we get with the gun. The 409 barrel is also mechanic 4, so we're not going to buy that. But we do know that this is in fact 29,000 rubles, so we'll add that on later. The Lancer handguard we do need to buy. The Thunderbeast, yes. The low profile gas block we get with the weapon, so we don't need to add that on. The Thunderbeast, we will need to buy this from the fleet. There is no other way to get it, unfortunately, so this is just very, very expensive. The Magpul M-Lock rail, yes, we can buy this. The RK2, we can buy that. The PRS Gen 3, we can buy this, and the Mutant will need to buy that as well. So even trying to minimize the costs on the flea, this comes to 283,000 plus the extra 41 that we had from the buffer tube and also from the barrel. So we're looking at over 320,000 rubles for this build, which is honestly pretty crazy. I don't think this is worth it, to be honest. I mean, given that this is the best in slots, the reason why this is so expensive, and there are other suppressors that are cheaper that you can choose to move in and out of, but that's, you know, that's pretty insane. I wouldn't really run this gun, to be honest with you. So how does our short unsuppressed version fare? Does this actually work out any better is a good question. So if we're looking at the short lowest recoil version, and we'll do exactly the same exercise, we're going to find parts, we'll get rid of the traders, and then we're going to remove some of these pieces here. So the strike industries, again, we will need to use this, but we know this is 12,000. We don't need this, we don't need this. We get the barrel actually as part of this weapon, so you can see now that we're reducing some of these costs. We also have the basic handguard, so that's not a problem. We also have the gas block, so that's also not an issue, we don't need that. And we will be buying all of these other parts. So this is now 201,000, 202,000 plus the 12, so that's going to get you to something like 214k, which is a bit better, but it's still very, very pricey. Now, given this looks a lot like an M4, we can make some of the suggestions and changes that I usually make for this. So if we change over to the RVG in terms of the foregrip, the growl is not really necessary, especially if you're not running suppressed. You don't really need all this ergo, so we can change that over to the MORG, which is a lot more efficient, and the PRS will change over to any of these MOEs plus the butt pad, which is a lot better. Now, this looks a lot like when I'm changing over an M4, and for good reason, because these parts are very efficient, and you still get 72 and 58 vertical recoil, which is pretty decent. If we go and find the parts on this, and again, we run the same exercise again, we're going to get rid of the receiver. We know it's 12k for this, that and that we don't need, this we don't need, that we don't need, and then we're going to be buying everything else. This is now 166,000 plus the 12k, and we're talking 179,000 rubles for the whole gun, which is actually getting into a not crazy range, given that the actual base weapon is 105,000. So not doing anything, it's going to cost you 105k anyway, and that's one of the issues with the Mutant, is that the base weapon is actually just quite expensive, so it's difficult for it to be a budget gun in any sense. Suppressed, this version comes to 54 ergo and 62 recoil, and just for comparison's sake, if you make the similar adjustments to the long version, you get 46 ergo and 56 recoil. That Thunderbeast suppressor is so expensive though, and is one of the main reasons why this build becomes so expensive if you're suppressed and using the best in slot one. And you can use a different one, and I'll stick up a table here of what is what overall, and you can see where the BMD sits with the rest of them for this type of 7.62 suppressor, so you can look yourself, as prices move around all over the place, so it's worth checking because they're really not static at all, as some of these are only on the flea market. Now, the 103 has better options when it comes to straight muzzle brakes, with the RRD giving minus 19% at mechanic 3. The best recoil here is 57, but the thing about these is that the suppressed versions are a lot worse. The AKM can just edge into 56, so a very small amount better than the 103, but it has way lower ergo at 49 versus the 103's 71. Suppressed, both of these rifles are 70 recoil or over, so one big takeaway here is that if you want to run a nice recoil weapon with a suppressor, the Mutant is your boy. Otherwise, you might just consider using an RRD Brake 103, because this is significantly cheaper than the Mutant equivalent. Consider this build, for example, a 64 recoil AK-103 with the highest trader level being Skier 4 and no mechanic 4 parts is just over 100k and will get the job done. And yes, it's not in the 50s for recoil, but it is under half the price of the Mutant. Onto magazines and ammo. The Mutant basically takes all of the regular AK mags from the AK Palms and the aluminiums, which lose 1 ergo, the big 40 rounder that loses 7 ergo, and it's pretty good actually. I spoke about this recently in my M4 video, where if you pick your rigs properly, you can get some good use out of these. And of course the huge drums at 75 and 73 rounds. These can be hilarious, but I would especially recommend stacking PS behind some BP, because BP is very expensive to fill a drum with if you die without shooting at the start of a raid, costing around 70 to 75,000 from Prapor for that one mag alone at the current prices of 985 per round, and that's if you buy it from the trader directly. On the flea, it's even higher, and right now is around 1300 per round, but this fluctuates a lot and can be even more expensive at times. So as mentioned right at the start, BP is the main reason that this gun is any good at all. And although I've been a little down in the past on BP, mainly due to the weapons that it goes in, I think with the Mutant it works pretty well given the slightly faster fire rate and the enhanced ability to hit targets at medium distance with the decreased recoil. If we take a look at the ammo chart, BP sits above something like M855A1 for the M4 by 2 pen, but is not as high as some of the hyper endgame rounds. But this is okay, because they either tend to be really low damage like M995 and APSX, or tricky to get into full auto in a similarly convenient way like 7.62 NATO. One beauty of BP is the 58 damage, which easily 2-taps the chest when it penetrates, as it doesn't suffer at all from any damage mitigation, given you'd need to reduce the damage by over 25% to stop this from happening. With a 95% chance to pen level 4 on the first hit and a 55% chance to pen level 5, BP is a routine player buster that hits a nice middle ground between dealing with lower level PMCs as well as relatively geared people too. With a 1% chance to pen level 6, it will struggle with Mega Chads running slicks, but given the decent damage, you can expect to kill someone in around 5-ish shots, which isn't bad given it's the best armor in the entire game. One other cool feature of BP is the ability to one-tap players in the chest with its fragmentation. This is only a 12% chance, but at 58 damage, this results in 50% more damage on a fragment, which is 87 damage. Practically speaking, this probably doesn't really change much, and any armor damage mitigation, even on a pen, will probably stop this from killing anyone with level 5 and maybe 4 armor, although I haven't tested that specifically. But against low or unarmored players and scavs, you still have this kind of 1 in 8 chance to thorax one tap, which is a nice little bonus. Honestly? I forgot to bring like the normal heals that I would. That was insane. That was insane. He did take it like a boss actually. Yeah, I couldn't really see, and I should have just ADS'd probably, but I'm pretty sure I killed the guy down there. How's our armor doing? It's doing pretty good actually. I think I killed him. We'll find out. Me too. Okay, so this guy just had like some shotgun shells. What did this guy have? SD, a Bastion. One of these rigs. He's dead, I'm sure. I can hear someone crawling. Ah! I don't know where that grenade went. Now he's dead. Now he's dead. Holy hell. Keep shooting the body just to be sure. I'm gonna have to after this. This is nuts. Loot mode engaged. So that was that dude. That was that dude. So what did this guy have? He had the tequila rig, but that's like 6. So I can't really take that because I don't want to drop my umbrella. Well, it's probably worth more than these, and I can take this in here actually. Maybe we do it this way. And then pop these two in here. Actually, we'll pop these two in. There, get rid of this. Put this in here. That's better. Take his bag, because why not? And then what was our man here? What did he have? Did he have a tequila rig as well? Oh, he had the tequila face shield. Okay, it's time to go. Actually, we'll swap these round. Wait, he's got his own one. Ah! Another one? Lots of scabs. Alright. Let's go. It's time to leave. Well. That was fun. If you learned something or enjoyed today's video and want to support the channel, please, as always, consider sending a like and a comment, as it helps with visibility for those who haven't found me yet on YouTube. You can follow me on Twitter and Twitch to check out when I'm live, which is currently 2 times a week, once on Friday at 9 PM UK time for the real-time recording of the Scav Talk podcast, which you can check out the link to in the description below, and a regular Tarkov stream on Saturday at 2 PM UK time in the afternoon. And with all that said, I'll see you next time, and as always, have fun in your raids.